China will still be the most dynamic growing economy. Now the internet and those kind of platform sector in China is very competitive because China has the best infrastructure in the world.
Thank you for joining us again to share your insight on the Chinese economy. My first question will go like this. What do you think will be the possible range of growth rate for the Chinese economy this year? And what's the rationale behind your prediction? Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. And it's my pleasure to have this interview again. I personally believe it would be possible for China to reach between 5% to 5.5% next year. That means China will continue to grow about 5%. And as China's economic share in the world is about 18% and more, that means with even 5% growth, China will contribute about 1 percentage point to the global growth. And China will continue to provide about 30% of the global economic expansion in the world. And so with that kind of figures, China will still be the most dynamic growing economy, make the most contribution to the global growth, provide a driving force for the global growth and stability.
Okay. So you mentioned that China faces some domestic and external challenges and difficulties. What are they, and what should we do to deal with that?
Well, China is the largest trading country in the world. And certainly, if the global economy is slowing down, and most likely that will have some impact on the Chinese economy because that will reduce China's export growth, the private sectors, dominated sectors. And their growth potential is dim, certainly that will hurt their confidence of growth and also their intention for further investment and so on. So I think it would be desirable for Chinese government to adopt the more proactive counter-cycle fiscal expansion as well as monetary expansion in order to provide more resources for supporting domestic investment, domestic consumption. We know that many people have some kind of argument China will never be able to catch up the US. And based on the analysis, China, shift its policy orientation towards state-owned sectors and neglect the private sectors. And the underlying theory, as you know, people believe private sector is more efficient than the state-owned sectors. And if the government shift its policy with focus to supporting the growth of the state-owned sectors and squeeze the potential or space for the private sectors, and then they, based on those kind of understanding, they think China, the productivity, China's growth will continue to drop. That's one reason they think China will never be able to catch up the US. Regarding the rising weight of the state-owned sectors, the declining weight of the private sectors, the reason why the state-owned sector increased and get more bank loan, it was because after 2008 global financial crisis, the advanced country have not fully recovered. And with this kind of continuous slowing down in the trade growth rate, the exporting sectors, dominated by the private sectors, was hurt the most.
Yeah.
And the investment was reduced. And under the kind of situation, certainly government has the obligation to provide some kind of offsetting measures or counter-cyclical measures. And the government certainly used fiscal policy to invest in public infrastructure. Those kind of investment not only increase the investment, those kind of investment will also generate job opportunities and provide the possibility for higher unemployment and higher consumption growth rate. And those kind of public infrastructure, for example, highways, high-speed train, 4G and 5G, those kind of public investment certainly were carried out by the large steel companies because that they are related to infrastructure. And infrastructure in a country certainly is the obligation of the government and mainly carried out by the steel enterprises. And with that, certainly, the steel sector's weight increased, but that was a result of the poor performing of the private sectors due to the poor picture in the global trade and the global GDP growth rate. If Chinese government did not invest in those kind of public infrastructure and so on, certainly the weight of the steel sector will not rise. However, the private sector will encounter even more difficulties because the investment in the infrastructure will create a demand for steel, cement, and glasses, and many other equipment and so on.
Yeah, I get your argument here, but there are some people saying that the investment in the state-owned enterprises are not as effective as expected. What's your view on this?
Well, now the internet and those kind of platform sector in China is very competitive. Like, Pinduoduo, Douyin, and Jingdong, and so on, Meituan. It's possible for them to be so prosperous because China has the best infrastructure in the world. Not only in 4G, 5G, but also in the highway system. And that provides a platform, the environment for them to be so dynamic, not only in the Chinese domestic market, but also in the international markets. Certainly, the infrastructure investment is not as profitable as in the private sector investment. But if you do not invest in those kind of infrastructure, then the private sector would be very hard to have industrial upgrading or to have technological innovations.
But there are some people saying that the uncertainty of the government policies is a major reason behind the tepid private investment.
Well, one argument is that for the listing of Ant and also the listing of Didi was all of a sudden stopped, causing the so-called uncertainty. I think all the government, every country to say we need to have a good regulation about the platform economy. We should not make platform economy to become oligarch. And I think the government policy towards that is to prevent those kind of oligarch to arise. And its a policy has been argued in almost every country. If you go to European country, they have a lot of discussion. And you go to US, but they may not be able to implement that. Before the regulation is improved and oligarchical control can be avoided, certainly we should not allow this thing to go forward. Other than that, I don't see the Chinese government change policies. And also, if you see, if Chinese government policy causing the private sectors to, unwilling to make investment, but it's not a reality. If you look into what are the most dynamically growing sector in China, electronic vehicles, solar panel, renewable energy, and solar and batteries. Those are all private sectors initiative. So I think that the sluggish in the Chinese private sector investment is not related to the policy changes. And the sluggish growth in the more traditional sector is related to what I say. The global demand dropped, and the investment opportunity for them has been replaced. And that's the main reason for the sluggish in their investment.
Okay. So speaking of this, China faces protectionism, faces export controls, and also restrictions in high-tech areas by some countries. So what do you think China should do to further promote its technological innovation, industrial upgrading?
I think that we need to understand trade is win-win. So any kind of intervention to trade hurt China hurt the country proposed policy and also hurt any other in the world. That's one thing. And then secondly, certainly that will have some negative impact on China, but may not be as big as people expect. For example, to set a very high tariff rate on China's export, let's say to the US, certainly it may cause some relocation of the production to Vietnam or to Indonesia, Malaysia, and so on. Yes, there are, China's direct export to the US reduced. And Vietnam, Indonesia's direct export to the US increased. But China's export to Vietnam, to Indonesia increased substantially because most of the relocation is in the final stage, assembly part of the product. Because for the intermediate equipment, intermediate components, they are mainly coming from China. Then in terms of high tech, and it would be better if China can get access to those kind of technology from the advanced country, and it's good for China, but it's also good for the advanced countries' high-tech companies. China has the largest market. For the high-tech, they need to continue to make investment in R&D in order to maintain their technological leadership position. And to make that possible, they need to have high profitability. But if those companies would not export their technology product to China, they will turn from high profitability to low profitability or even encounter losses. And so, to put those kind of restriction on the export to China, it will hurt their companies. In a way, even more than hurting the Chinese company. The reason I say that is because most technologies are not monopolized by only one company. So their market will be taken away by other companies. And so when they turn from high profitability to low profitability or losses, and also the incumbent leaders may lose their leadership, and they may be, wiped out at the end. So it will hurt those kind of companies. Then I think China certainly need to rely on indigenous innovation to break through, to get a breakthrough.
So what policies or measures do you think China should take to increase its self-reliance on science and technology?
Well, industrial policy, I'm an advocate of industrial policy. Because economic development is a process of continuous technological innovation and industrial upgrading. In the technology innovation and industrial upgrading, there are many areas that will encounter market failures. It would need to have the government support to overcome those kind of market failures. If you look historically, no developing country without the government active industrial policy can catch up the advanced country. Not only so, no advanced country can maintain their advanced position without active government industrial policy to support their technological innovation and industrial upgrading. And we should use industrial policy to overcome the market failures to support the entrepreneur to get into those kind of sectors and to turn the sector from the latent comparative advantages to actual competitive advantage. And for China as a catching up country, we have many sectors to catch up. And for that, certainly, as I described, we need to have industrial policy to support sector, and we should utilize our advantage in human capital in domestic market and also in a complete set of supply chain and so on to compete in those kind of sectors. Before the 1980s, Japan was very active in using industrial policy to support the emergence of the new industry, new sectors. And in the 1980s, they were brainwashed to say industrial policy was wrong.
And it is ironic that the Western countries currently, they are using industrial policies.
Right. The US continue to do that, European countries continue to do that, but Japan was advised not to do that, and they accept that.
Yeah. Okay. So you have rebutted some arguments relating to the causes of the tepid investment in the private sector.
Yeah.
What measures do you think the government should adopt to further stimulate the investment in this sector? And also, as you said, to encourage the private enterprises to take more on the innovations?
Well, I think that first we need to understand what's the reason for the slowing down in China's growth in order to build up the confidence. And as I often say, China still has 8% growth potential, and it should be possible to grow at 5 to 6%. We should have that confidence. And secondly, because the global economy is continuing to slow down, and the private sector's export will still hurting some kind of a difficult situation, and we need to make more domestic investment. And for the government can do is that looking into areas which the private sector would not make their investment.
And also, some people are worried about the slowdown in China's economic growth over the past decade, citing various reasons. For instance, the declining of the demographic dividend in China. What's your view on this?
But the most important thing is not the number of the working people, is how effective they provide their labor input. And so the effective labor. Effective labor consists of two components: number of workers and also the quality of the workers. And the quality of the worker depends very much on education. Okay, but aging is not a black swan. Certainly the government and household, they all adopt offsetting measures to make investment in education. And as a result, yes, the number of the workers expansion slowed down, but the educational worker increased substantially. Japan, after the 1990s, they also had the issue of aging, and they also have a very slow growth. But it was not because of aging. It was because their inability to have a continuous technological innovation and industrial upgrading. After the 1980s, you did not see any new industry, any new technology to emerge from Japan. And that was the reason for the productivity to grow so slowly.
Also, what's your view on the decline of the foreign direct investment into China? People are worried about this.
We need to look what kind of investment being reduced. We are losing competitive advantages in more labor-intensive sectors. Certainly, the U.S. policy, trade restriction, will causing some relocation of production to other countries. But in higher volume, high-tech sectors, we continue to see the inflow of investment to China. And those are areas for our industrial upgrading, our technological innovation. So yes, some investment has been readjusted, but that's a natural process. Any country will encounter that.
What role do you expect the foreign investors will play in China's future development?
Well, it's a win-win. Because if they come to make investment in China, then they enjoy the market expansion in China. And they will also facilitate our industrial upgrading. And so we can grow faster with a higher quality.
So if we look at the Chinese economy under a medium to long-term perspective, what potentials or advantages do you think will China have to ensure its high-quality development?
I think the most important is certainly we need to further deepening our market reform and to reduce investment barriers. And we should continue to improve our hard infrastructure and institution to make investment can be more effective, to make economic operation can be more effective. And at the same time, we should continue to open up our economies. So our growth will be an opportunity not only for China, but also for the world. Certainly, I think China will continue to be the driver of the global growth.